Woman is a trap of nature, said Arthur Schopenhauer, a German philosopher known for his relentless view of human desires and the dynamics between the sexes. This statement is not just a provocation, it's a brutal invitation to reflect on how many men, without realizing it, become prisoners of the feminine game, trapped in cycles of validation, anxiety, and insecurity. Have you ever noticed that the more you try to please a woman, the more distant, colder, and harder to reach she becomes? This is no coincidence. There is an invisible dynamic at play. And if you don't understand this dynamic, you become predictable, disposable, and, worse, emotionally enslaved. Schopenhauer didn't say this out of hatred for women, but because he saw human nature without romantic illusions. He understood that women, driven by biological and instinctive logic, test, provoke, and push men's limits, not out of malice, but as part of selection. And what separates the average man from the high-value man is precisely how he responds to these tests. If you still believe that you need to prove your worth, explain yourself, or chase after her, you've already started losing. In this video, I'm going to show you, based on Schopenhauer's philosophy, how a man's true strength lies in mastering the art of indifference, self-control, and unshakable presence. Because once you learn this, the game changes, and it changes forever. What I'm about to reveal is not just another shallow seduction formula you find all over the internet. It's a deep, rare, and brutally honest understanding of how the dynamic between men and women truly works, and how men with genuine mental, emotional, and social high value position themselves in this game. And yes, this perspective comes directly from the mind of Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most feared, hated, and yet respected philosophers when it comes to human nature. You're going to understand, once and for all, that what people call a difficult woman is nothing more than a direct reflection of the instinctive tests the feminine psyche applies, whether consciously or unconsciously, to measure the mental strength of the man standing before her. And here's the secret. The high-value man never plays this game on her terms. He doesn't react. He doesn't chase. He doesn't step into the validation cycle, because he operates on a completely different level. This video is not for those who want to please, convince, or beg for love. It's for those who want to become the kind of man who attracts without needing to prove anything. The kind of man who, even in silence, exerts a magnetic influence simply because his presence communicates strength, control, and detachment. If you've made it this far, understand this. What you're about to discover will flip a permanent switch in your mind. Because the moment you master this philosophy, you are no longer a pawn on the emotional chessboard. You become the player, and the one who plays, chooses. There is a game happening at all times in the interactions between men and women. Most men don't even realize this game exists, and that's exactly why they lose. These are men who live in constant reaction, trying to guess what she wants, trying to please, validate, impress, without understanding that the more they do this, the more she pulls away. The hidden game is invisible to those who don't know the rules. Schopenhauer understood this game in its rawest form. He said that behind every interaction, there is a biological, almost cruel logic that guides human behavior. The woman unconsciously tests. She challenges. She provokes. Not out of malice, but as part of a natural filter, a selection mechanism that separates the weak man from the strong, the insecure from the unshakable. The mistake of ordinary men is believing that these tests are a cry for more attention, more affection, more devotion. But in reality, it's exactly the opposite. Every test is a non-verbal question she's asking, even if she doesn't realize it. Is he strong enough not to be shaken? Is he emotionally stable? Or will he fall apart trying to please me? The man who understands this game does not react. He doesn't justify himself. He doesn't seek approval. He stays centered, grounded, watching the game from the outside. And it's precisely at that moment that the game shifts. Because when you refuse to play on her terms, she starts playing on yours. The greatest mistake a man can make, and perhaps the most common, is believing that he's responsible for solving a woman's discomfort. that he needs to soothe, please, comply, or prove his worth every time she creates tension, becomes distant, cold, or provocative. And without realizing it, he steps right into the trap Schopenhauer warned about, becoming a slave to desire, a hostage to external validation. From that point on, the man completely loses his power. His energy starts orbiting around her instead of himself. Everything he does becomes a reaction, not an action. He becomes predictable, easy to read, easy to manipulate. And in the feminine world, predictability and neediness are synonyms for loss of value. Schopenhauer once said that he who does not master his impulses becomes a puppet of his own will. And that's exactly what happens when a man fails to understand the dynamics of feminine testing. He begins to negotiate his own dignity in exchange for crumbs of attention, for tiny doses of validation. And ironically, the more he offers, the less he receives. Women sense this immediately. They feel it the moment a man loses his center, when he disconnects from his own axis. And in that exact instant, she loses interest, loses respect, and often starts testing him even more, not to connect, but to confirm what deep down she already suspects, that he is not a man of high value. If there's a superpower a man can have in the game of attraction, it's called strategic indifference. And make no mistake, this has nothing to do with coldness, arrogance, or lack of empathy. It's about self-mastery. It's about having such control over your own emotions that no test, no provocation, and no feminine mood swing can pull you off center. It's about showing, without saying a word, that you are not in this world to react, but to choose. Schopenhauer understood that the free man is the one who is a slave, neither to his desires nor to external circumstances. And in the realm of relationships, this means that the high-value man does not bow to emotional games. He observes, he understands, and above all, he keeps his dignity intact. Because the one who controls himself controls the game. When a woman realizes that her tests do not destabilize this man, something powerful happens. The balance shifts completely. What began as provocation turns into admiration. What seemed like disinterest turns into deep attraction. Because the man who doesn't need becomes exactly the man she wants the most. This is the paradox that weak men never understand, but that high-value men embody. Strategic indifference isn't ignoring out of pride. It's knowing that you are the center of your own universe, that your mission, your life, your goals, and your personal growth will always come before any form of external validation. And this exact positioning is what separates ordinary men from unforgettable men. Schopenhauer was clear and ruthless in his philosophy. Desire is suffering. And there is no place where this truth manifests more cruelly than in romantic relationships. The man who desperately desires to be accepted, loved, and validated becomes a prisoner of that very desire. And the prison of desire is invisible, until he realizes that everything he does revolves around earning the approval of someone who often doesn't even value him. Uncontrolled desire causes a man to lose his center. He starts projecting his happiness onto something external, onto someone he cannot control, onto answers that are not in his hands. And in that very moment, he surrenders his own power. He becomes an emotional beggar. And as Schopenhauer said, he who desires too much becomes miserable, because desire is never fully satisfied. It's a thirst that constantly renews itself. And this is exactly what turns so many men into emotional slaves. They believe that if they can just get that woman, that approval, that look, then, finally, they will be complete, valuable, and happy. But the brutal truth is this: the more a man desires, the more he repels. Because the energy of neediness is noticeable, it's almost tangible, and it communicates only one thing: scarcity. The high-value man breaks this cycle. He understands that nothing external can ever be the source of his happiness, his worth, or his peace. When he kills desire as a prison, he is reborn as a free man. And paradoxically, it is this freedom that makes women, and life itself, start chasing him. Because freedom, strength, and detachment are deeply magnetic. The high-value man sees feminine tests exactly for what they are, psychological and emotional filters. He doesn't interpret these tests as an offense, as disrespect, or as a personal attack. On the contrary, he understands that these challenges are simply part of female nature, an unconscious selection process that separates the strong men from the weak. And precisely because of that, he doesn't react. He observes. When she plays hard to get, when she provokes, when she pretends not to care, when she creates little tensions, the average man panics. He scrambles to please, to explain, himself to prove his worth. But the high-value man remains composed. He doesn't chase, he doesn't justify, he doesn't rush. Because he knows that those who rush stumble, and those who stumble lose respect. What this man does is simple and brutally effective. He does not reward challenging behavior with more attention. Instead, he withdraws emotionally. He shifts his focus back to his own life, his own mission, and lets silence do the work for him. Silence, absence, and the calm confidence of someone who is not competing are some of the most powerful psychological triggers that exist, and this activates deep within her a very clear realization. This man is not like the others. She realizes, often in a way that feels uncomfortable for her, that she has no control over this man. And that's when the game flips. Because deep down there is nothing more magnetic to a woman than a man she cannot destabilize. That man becomes challenging, mysterious, rare, and because of that, desired at a level that goes far beyond logic. Detachment doesn't mean being cold, insensitive, or indifferent to life. In the eyes of Schopenhauer and of high-value men, detachment is a strategy of inner power. It's understanding that nothing, absolutely nothing, outside of you should have control over your emotions, your peace, or the direction of your life. As long as a man remains trapped in desire, in neediness, and in the pursuit of external validation, he will always be vulnerable. The high-value man practices a kind of detachment that borders on art. He lives connected to his mission, his purpose, his personal evolution. He doesn't desperately seek to please. He doesn't try to force connections. And above all, he doesn't lose himself in the anxiety of winning over someone who fails to recognize his worth. Because he knows one brutal truth. When you are enough for yourself, you become magnetic. This type of detachment is not passivity. It is mastery. It's looking at a woman who tests, who withdraws, who tries to provoke insecurity, and simply smiling internally, knowing that none of this touches you, because your energy is fully focused on what truly matters, your growth, your discipline, your vision of the future. And in that very act, you communicate something silent but devastating. I don't need you, but you know that wanting me is inevitable. She feels this energy. A woman senses when a man lives by choice, not by scarcity, when he offers his presence as a gift, not as a desperate attempt to be chosen. And at that moment, the entire game flips. Because true masculine detachment doesn't push away, it attracts. And it attracts in a way that is powerful, constant, and often uncontrollable. Purpose is the anchor that keeps the high-value man grounded, even when the world around him tries to shake him. Schopenhauer saw purpose as the driving force of life, the very thing that gives meaning and direction to existence. Without purpose, a man becomes a leaf in the wind, vulnerable to every external influence, including the emotional tests and games that women may impose. When a man lives with a clear sense of purpose, his energy is different. He doesn't chase approval because he knows that his worth is tied to his personal mission, not to how others react. This internal clarity creates a magnetic field that naturally attracts not just women, but opportunities, respect, and admiration. A man with purpose is rare, and it's that very rarity that makes him extraordinary. Furthermore, purpose gives a man a profound sense of self-sufficiency, the very foundation of healthy detachment. He knows that he can lose a woman, a friendship, or even a job without his identity ever being shaken. This inner security is felt by everyone. It's what makes him irresistible, because at the deepest level, what truly attracts is the man who has no desperate need to attract. And ultimately, living with purpose isn't just about grand achievements or massive goals. It's about the constant pursuit of something greater than oneself. This ongoing pursuit creates an invisible force, a presence that no difficult woman can ever ignore, one that brings her to her knees, even without him uttering a single word. This level of emotional mastery allows him to read a woman's emotions with precision, understanding her tests, her fears, and her hidden motivations, without ever becoming emotionally entangled or reactive. While most men respond with outbursts, defensiveness, or desperate attempts to fix things, the emotionally intelligent man answers with calm, clarity, and assertiveness. And that naturally commands both respect and admiration. Beyond that, this emotional intelligence gives him the ability to maintain his inner peace, even in the face of challenges, rejection, or uncertainty. He knows that emotions are temporary storms, passing clouds, and that his stability must never depend on someone else's moods, reactions, or behavior. This unshakable serenity is magnetic. It draws in women who crave maturity, security, and real masculine strength. And here's the truth. Emotional intelligence isn't a gift. It's a skill. It's a discipline. It's something the high-value man consciously develops because he knows this is the foundation for healthy, lasting, and profoundly magnetic relationships. Authenticity is the highest expression of the inner strength a high-value man possesses. Schopenhauer once said that being true to oneself is the foundation of all wisdom, and it's exactly this truth that separates the man who truly captivates from the man who merely performs. The high-value man does not mold himself to meet the expectations of others. He doesn't wear masks. He never tries to become something he's not in order to please or impress. Why? Because he understands that real attraction is born from the truth that radiates from within. Authenticity creates a natural magnetism because it builds real, undeniable connection. Women sense when a man is real. It's a feeling that transcends words, image, or appearance. And that authenticity radiates a level of confidence, clarity, and masculine presence that cannot be faked. That's why the authentic man never needs to force anything. He doesn't chase. He doesn't perform. He simply is. And that is enough to create deep impact. Furthermore, authenticity creates an atmosphere of trust and respect in every relationship. When a man is clear about who he is, what he wants, and what his boundaries are, he sets a standard so high that only women of true value step forward. He has no tolerance for manipulation, no patience for games, because his strength lives in his integrity. And ultimately, being authentic is an act of courage, especially in a world that constantly pressures men to conform, to please, and to seek approval. The high-value man embraces that courage every single day, and it is that courage that makes him unforgettable, magnetic, and powerful, not just to women, but to life itself. Patience is one of the most underrated virtues when we talk about the high-value man. Schopenhauer taught us that life is a long game, where impulsiveness and haste only lead to disorder and suffering. The true man of value knows that achievement, whether in life or relationships, is not a sprint, but a marathon that demands calm and persistence. When dealing with a difficult woman, the rush for immediate results is the greatest enemy. The impatient man reveals insecurity and creates an anxious energy that pushes her away. The patient man, on the other hand, understands that time is a powerful ally, and that the maturity of feelings and connection only happens at the right pace, respecting the natural flow of things. This patience translates into knowing how to wait for the right moment, to act, to speak, to approach, or to step back. It's a silent demonstration of confidence and self-control that elevates his value in her eyes and creates an environment where respect and desire flourish naturally. In the end, patience is the foundation for building any solid and lasting relationship. It is what separates men who get desperate and fall into mistakes from those who, with calm and strategy, win not only the difficult woman but also their own destiny. Resilience is the quality that defines a true high-value man when facing adversity. In his philosophy, Schopenhauer emphasized that suffering is an inevitable part of life, but what truly matters is how we deal with it. A resilient man does not let himself be broken by failure, rejection, or hardship. He grows stronger with every fall and learns from every experience. When it comes to dealing with a difficult woman, rejection is often not personal. It's a test to measure the man's inner strength. Resilience helps him avoid internalizing these moments as defeats and instead see them as opportunities to grow and improve. He understands that real value lies in standing firm, maintaining his purpose and self-control, even when things don't go as expected. This emotional strength creates an energy field of determination and persistence that is impossible to ignore. Women, even the most challenging, sense this energy and respect the man who doesn't give up, who doesn't panic, and who maintains his posture despite the obstacles. Resilience transforms the average man into a leader, a true conqueror of his own life. In the end, resilience is not something you are born with. It is something you cultivate day after day through discipline, self-awareness, and the constant practice of pushing your own limits. It is this journey that shapes the high-value man who, by overcoming challenges, becomes a living example of power, self-mastery, and magnetism. Now that you truly understand what sets a high-value man apart, when dealing with a challenging woman, from self-control, purpose, emotional intelligence, to patience and resilience, it's time to start applying these principles in your own life. Remember, this isn't about changing who you are. It's about revealing your best self with awareness, authenticity, and inner strength. If you want to transform your relationships and be recognized as a man who stands far above the average, start today by mastering these skills. The journey won't always be easy, but it's the only path that leads to true emotional freedom and real magnetic power. And here's the challenge for you. Reflect right now. Which of these principles are you going to start applying this week? Drop it in the comments. I want to know which one will make the difference in your journey. If you got value from this video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications so you never miss content that will take your mindset and your life to the next level. Share this with that friend who needs to hear this message. Together, we grow stronger. See you in the next video. And always remember, the power is within you. Use it wisely.